Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. As always, I'm your host, Scott Carson. Excited to be here today. It's a beautiful day here in Austin, Texas, which is home, but I want to say thank you to everybody across the country and the world that's listening to the Note Closer Show today, from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between, along with our listeners in over 82 countries across the world who listen to the Note Closer Show. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. What I wanted to discuss today a little bit with this episode is something a little bit different. Somebody asked me this question via email the other day, and I thought it would make a really great episode for the Note Closer Show. I'm headed to Orlando later this afternoon. We're going to be there for a lunch and learn with my buddy Tyler Sheff at the Wyndham International Orlando Resort. Excited about that. And then we're going to be there in Orlando for the remainder of the week for the 5th annual Podfest Multimedia Expo put on by Chris Cremosta. So excited about that. We're going to have a great time. Looking forward to hanging out with our extended podcast family and also some of our Note family there in Central Florida. Beautiful thing that I love to share with people, obviously, is the world of amazingness that comes with buying distressed debt, distressed notes. But with this episode, I thought I'd talk a little bit, like I said, what would happen if the note market suddenly dried up? What would happen? What would Scott do if there was no more distressed debts out there, or it became illegal overnight to buy stuff? Like if Congress passed something that you had to have $1 million bond, or you had to have some sort of weird regulation out there that made it impossible for investors to buy distressed debt. What would I do? What would Scott Carson do in the real estate industry? Well, many people don't know that when I started back in 2002 as a real estate investor out of college, I screwed up royally. I bought a couple investment properties, and then I was going to be the landlord. I overpaid for the properties. I paid full value, thinking that my rents would cover everything, and that didn't happen good. And of course, the market kind of went a little bit weird here in Austin, and I became a distressed borrower as well, trying to make 6 mortgage payments, 3 firsts and 3 seconds, on a private school teacher salary. I was married at the time. So, but and then I fast forward a couple years, I started learning real estate investing, how to do some of the great things that a lot of people do to get creative about finding deals. And yes, I'm talking about chasing foreclosure lists. Some people are familiar with that, where you're buying that from like foreclosure.com. Here in Texas, we have something called the Roddy list that's in, I think, 11 to 15 of the biggest counties, up and down I-35 from Dallas all the way down to San Antonio. That's a great list. It was a great list to buy. I use that list to track down a lot of distressed debt, actually, finding the banks, especially the smaller regional banks that were foreclosing on specific assets, and using those properties that were on the foreclosure list as my warm lead to calling the asset managers at the banks to say, hey, what else do you have on your books that you're looking to get rid of? And I see we've got some people join us online. For those that don't, we live stream these to Facebook, so it's good to see. Hey, Ken Bechtel, good to see you, buddy. Back to Florida again. Haley Gant from Quest Trust Company. John Shipley, Todd LaPierre, we look to see you this weekend. Charles Wilson. People from all across the country join us in live there. Teresa Crowley, good to see you as well, Teresa. But as always, if you're listening to this, you can always go to our Facebook group, The Note Closer Show, or We Close Notes, or Scott Carson on Facebook, and follow along there. I really encourage you to subscribe to those, or to also listen to us, subscribe to the show on iTunes or any other podcasting platform. But anyway, going back to my early days, I would probably do a little something like that. I would literally go back in and start pulling foreclosure lists and start recognizing the smaller institutions out there. Now, if I couldn't buy the debt, I get that. Couldn't buy the debt. Let's just say Scott can't buy the debt anymore. Let's say there's like I say, a law gets passed, knee-jerk reaction by Congress, and a lot of private investors out there that are used to the note game can't do that anymore. Weirder things have happened, all right? Pass a law, you've got to be a federal chartered bank or something like that to buy debt. Weird things have happened. So here's some of the things that I used to do that I found deals that made a lot of sense to me. Now, I'm not a big fan of chasing the foreclosure list because that's the lowest hanging fruit out there. And in some parts of the country, there's not that many foreclosures at all. All right? It's not easy to find, and you've got to do some creative things that kind of help you. So I would jump on the foreclosure list just to see what banks are foreclosing on. Now, I wouldn't target I wouldn't target the bigger banks still. I would still look at the smaller banks that has stuff on their portfolio, because then I would probably start chasing the REO side of things, trying to see about buying those non-performing assets once they foreclosed on and took the property back. That would be my source, is reaching out directly to the bank asset managers. Now, that's going to be a hard thing to do, because most of the banks now these days, they have their own realtors that are handling the resale of stuff, right? So what do I do now? Well, I would try to target any of the ugly properties. I would target a couple of things as well. I would be looking at the foreclosure list to see about targeting for potential houses with equity. This is an important thing. Houses with equity that I could take over in subject to deals. What's a subject to deal? That's basically where you take over payments. The mortgage stays in the borrower's name. They're either distressed in one form or fashion. They either have lost their job, they want to move, they've had a deceased borrower, they've gone through a divorce. They need somebody to step in and take over the mortgage. So usually there's arrearages that are owed. So I would look at the numbers and see, okay, is there any equity? You definitely want to buy a note that's got equity on this and subject to, unless it's got a really, really, really low interest rate. And you could turn around and wrap it where the traditional mortgage payment at a little higher interest rate would cover the underlying mortgage. Or you could rent the property out and make difference between the arbitrage. Now, we had Quincy Long on yesterday talking about how you arbitrage other people's funds, paying them 8% and made a way above 8% on a deal. It's kind of similar to that. You've got a mortgage that's, let's say it's $1,000 a month. You want to make sure and not take something over that's going to be, would only rent for $900 a month. You want to make sure and take something over, it would, probably rent for $1,500 a month, or more sizable, several $100s above what the existing mortgage payment is. So it makes sense for you to do that. You'd also want to have a licensed servicer probably take that on, so you're making sure that the underlying mortgage gets paid out of the proceeds coming in. And you would try to, if you're not in Texas, I would try to do a lease option that way. Try to get the borrower to put some down payment down and an option to buy that property at a future date, usually 24 months out. Would be great. I wouldn't necessarily do it 12 months or less, just because the fact you've got to probably get a little time to buy that mortgage down, get a little bit of difference between the unpaid balance and what the value is, and hopefully let appreciation kick in if the market is growing, so that you're building your little bit of equity cushion in between there. Hopefully that makes sense for everybody out there. So another thing that I would focus on, I would look at subject to deals where maybe the borrowers wanted to walk, or maybe something I could take over where there is some equity. Now, the equity thing is a nice aspect of things, because if I could come and take it over, then I could either, like I say, I could owner finance it and do a wraparound mortgage if they still allowed that, or I would basically turn around and try to sell the property off and make the difference of splits. Now, where would I find these type of assets? Yeah, obviously the foreclosure list is one thing. You'd probably have to bring some capital in, have an investment partner come in and fund in a second lien or mezzanine level for short term, to help those, to buy you some time to do that. Honestly, I only throw that out there because we've done a few of those in our day of taking stuff over and working through those. It's a little bit of a harder play to deal with a borrower, because a borrower usually wants you to buy the property. Now, that's not saying it won't happen. And a lot of people using subject tos for years. It's a great thing. It actually comes in really handy on the commercial side of being able to take over loans and take over payments on that. But let's move back here to the residential side, because that's where most people are looking at, okay? What I would do also, here's a couple of things that I would do. I would look at the path of progress. And what does that mean? Well, I would literally pull up a map. I would go to the city zoning departments and find out where the permits are being pulled, and looking to see the path of progress. Which way is it moving? Is it moving out the highway out of town? Is it moving circular? Is it moving one general direction? And what I would do is I would go at least a mile out of town, all right? A mile out of town, and I would start talking to the borrowers or the owners, property owners in those areas, and see if they'd willing to let me put an option on the property for a price. $100 option fee, and make it a 5-year option. Now, why would somebody do that? Because the fact is, look, tell me what you're looking for. I'll give you a full price on what you're looking for. Just give me the option to have 5 years to take this down. Well, what's going to happen in 5 years? Now, I know it's a little bit of a longer extended play, but in some cases, you're going to obviously have the path of progress moving out. And what's going to happen with the path of progress? New buildings are going to be built up. Things are going to be rezoned. Property values are usually going to go up in the path of progress. What am I hoping for? Well, I'm hoping that in that 5-year period, the property values have escalated well beyond what I have the option on, and then I can turn around and then sell that option off to somebody to take the property down and make the difference. So if it was worth 100, somebody was willing to give me $100,000 for the house, now put an option on it. Hey, great, I got 5 years. They signed off on it. I'm only out $100. In 5 years, let's say it grew to 120, 130. Great. I turn around, exercise my option to buy and sell that property. I'm making the 20 to 30,000 split between what I'm selling the property for and the option. Now, the important thing about an option is if once you get it, don't hold on to it. You need to go file it at the county so it becomes on title. So if the person then decides to sell the house to somebody else, guess what happens? Your option shows up and it blocks the sale out from underneath of you. I know a lot of people, I put an option on the property. Well, they never went and recorded it, and they had that sold out from underneath them, and then they got to go to court trying to get the things. The reason you want to put an option on and record it, spend the extra $30 to record it at the county, is that then it goes on title. That will clog up if the borrower or the property owners try to sell it out from under you. Once they've agreed to that option, go file it and just wait. Just wait. It's a great play to do. You may want to do it on raw land. You may do it on farmland with options outside, because those values are going to increase. And if you can wait around 3 to 5 years, you're going to have some options that really, really explode. You know, that's one of the great things. I've got a friend, Greg Reed, who is good friends. If you've ever watched TV and heard of the Scorpion, one of the smartest men in the world, he predicted that in another 5 to 10 years, when I think a lot of people agree to this, is Uber is going to take over a lot of and cause a lot of damage out there, not only in the trucking industry with automated cars and automated vehicles, but with Uber is going to remove, really, once you have automated cars, it's going to take away the need for us to have cars, which is going to basically eliminate a lot of the jobs for maintenance, gas, things like that, along with taxi cabs and also the middle class right now that's really using Uber to survive. So what does that mean long term? Well, it means, A, you're going to have a lot of people, you're going to have a bigger divide between the wealthy and the poor. And then you're also going to have a lot of places looking to recycle cars, recycle the traditional gas-powered cars. So what the Scorpion is saying, he's looking outside of town, buying property and stuff like that, and then turning those into, looking to turn those into car recycling centers, which is a little bit different play, but it's the same facet of realizing that, hey, 5 years from now, property values outside of town are going to be a lot more valuable than they are today. I look at Austin, Texas right now, where we're at, and the economic development boards here in Keep Austin Weird are looking at the city, and you can see the size of the city by looking at a map. Well, they predict in the next 10 years, the center part of Austin is going to be 20 miles west of where we're at, 20 miles west. So that means there's a lot of growth going place, and we've already seen that happening here in Austin, Texas. You see that in a lot of areas around the country. So keep that in mind. Maybe you want to go look at some of the options. Maybe you want to look at some of the land taking place and put an option on it and just see if they'll be interested. The homeowners or the property owners out there be willing to give you a price. And you know what happens if it doesn't go? If 5 years comes and you don't close, you're only at $100. You can release the option and move on if it doesn't work out that way. But it's kind of a cool little play to really look at where the market's going and looking where your cities are going and identifying opportunities as things get reclassified or rezoned from residential to commercial or vice versa. That's one of the plays that I would do. Another play that I would do that would probably return a little bit more capital and make money a little bit faster is I would not spend my time, like I said before, chasing out foreclosures. I wouldn't be mass mailing yellow letters out to zip codes or postcards like that. I don't think that's a smart play, especially when you're in such a competitive market. You've got to do things a little bit differently to find deals out there. You can't do the same play that everybody's out there making things happen. Good morning, Alicia. Good morning. Good to see you. Got some friends on Facebook there commenting, which is awesome as well. So what would I do? Well, first thing, I would go down to the city or cities that I'm investing in and go meet with the code enforcement team, the zoning team. The code enforcement team is be the better one. These are the individuals that are driving around your city and looking at properties, make sure that they're up, like code enforcement. They're making sure everything is up to the par, that you don't have trash or you don't have a couch sitting in your front yard or that your property is maintained. While these are a big kind of a pain in the ass for some investors, they're a great way to find distressed properties, either vacant properties or properties where the borrowers on these, or the property owners may not be able to maintain. And a lot of times those properties are starting to get fined. Well, if you can track down the borrowers, whether they're out-of-state owners, maybe they're elderly that have moved out of the property, moved into a home with other family, or people that have just moved out of the city, you may be able to find a great deal that A, you can either A, take over subject to, or B, may have some equity that built in because they probably have not maintained the property for a few years. So if you're able to come in and do some light rehab, fix the zoning issues, you may be able to get those fines removed and have quite a bit of equity on an asset that you can sell off and make some quick cash on that stuff. Or owner finance it or turn in a rental. There's a variety of different things. Just because you're upside down doesn't necessarily mean it's a death sentence for the property. I know quite a few investors who have taken over subject to properties where they were upside down initially because there was a low payment on the property. The PITI was substantially less than what market rent was, or the interest rate was extremely low compared to what they could finance the property, put a lease option, borrower into the property. Now I'm in Texas. We can't do lease options beyond 6 months. Or, I'm sorry, beyond 180 days is illegal. Now you can do a lease option to an investor, to an LLC. You just can't do it an owner occupant. So that's something. In other areas of the country, you can still do lease options left and right. As always, I would highly recommend you meet with your attorneys and legal counsel and make sure you're following proper laws in the state and city that you're investing in. Now, another aspect of things that I would do, besides looking at options, besides looking at subject twos, besides talking to the code enforcement and code enforcement officers to find out the assets that they have trouble with, that they're glad to share that information with, because here's a list of properties with code enforcement issues. That's public knowledge. It becomes a great place for you to really do a little bit of work and go forth from there. Going back to code enforcement, I've known some of my buddies, investors, who have targeted houses that were burned out. Why? Because A, they're often already paid off because the insurance company's come in and made a claim and paid it off. And the homeowners may not want to go through the trouble of fixing the property up, going through that, having to let somewhere stay off and have moved on and gone somewhere else. So at least for opportunities for you to come in, pick up a shell of a house, very cheap, and if you want to do some heavy rehabs or full rebuild on the property, that leads for an opportunity for you as well. Teresa Crowley says on here, she's a great idea. I just met a gentleman that is on the zoning board, and I'm interested in investing in PA. That's awesome. Glad to hear, Teresa. I would talk not only just the zoning, but talk to the zoning board and see where the path of progress is going. They'll often be able to tell you what they're expecting things are going to, and then I reach out to the code enforcement gentlemen or people there as well. Sometimes they're not the most easiest to deal with because let's face it, they're dealing with finding people on a daily basis. But if you're seeing weed liens, and I don't mean that's the weed you smoke, I'm talking about when the grass gets too tall. If you're seeing weed liens on different properties, you may want to take a look at. Now that's one, hang on a second. Hopefully you picked up that nugget right there. Oftentimes when a city puts a lien on a property, they file it, obviously, a weed lien. So you could go down or jump on the county records and search for anybody for any weed liens or any demolition orders, all right? Things like that. You'll often see some of that stuff at the county, and those are opportunities for properties that are obviously distressed for the most part, okay? So one of my favorites to do, and some of you guys may not like this, I'm just going to put full disclosure out there. You may not like what I'm about to share. One of the most effective sources we used when I was living here originally, before I started moving out, is I would use Leo letters, but I would only use them for one thing every week. And what was that? I would literally open up the paper and look at the obituary section. And people passed on, people are dying. Unfortunately, we have more people dying on a daily basis. We have more people getting old than being born. I heard a statistic state that the other day. So you just got to keep in mind, the elderly are, the people getting older day in, day out. They often have property, and a lot of times they don't have family that's there to help them out with some things. Sometimes they do, but they're not present to kind of help with the property. So when people pass, one of the things that I used to do, and if the note business died overnight, here's where I would go. I would literally pull up the obituary section in the paper or online and track to see who passed away. And then I would simply jump on the county appraisal district in the surrounding 2 or 3 counties and see if they own any property in the area. And then I would send them a letter. Hey, if it was John Smith that passed, hi, hello, Mr. Smith, my name is Scott Carson. I would like to talk about potentially buying your property at this address. Now, so their primary residence or it's investment property, whatever it is, I'm just mailing to the mailing thing. Now, this is a thing that I don't usually expect to get a lot of immediate responses to. Sometimes you will, other times you won't. And you have to be prepared. It's probably not going to be the bar, because the bar passed and they call you. Whoa, that's one heck of a resurrection. I'll tell you that. You don't want to mess with that. That's the power of God right there. But what I'm getting is probably going to get phone calls a week, 2 weeks, 30 days out from either a family member, a spouse, a child, an attorney handling the estate. Because if people are passing and they don't have a will in place, or maybe they have property that may need work. Teresa says, I've done that. It's funny. Good thing, good times. But people call you and say, well, how do you know my father? How'd you know my husband? Oh, I'm sorry. I did not know your husband. I was just simply mailing letters out to people in areas of the town that I'm looking to buy property in. And this has resulted in some really great deals. And it's also a true win-win, because in most cases with probate properties, the family members don't have the money to come and rehab it. They don't understand what it takes to get a property up to code or to refix it. They don't have the time or the patience a lot of times. And while your biggest issue is going to be dealing with borrowers who think the property's worth something when realistically it's down here. Hey, it needs work. Hey, it was full value. Here's what it would look like. But your property is not full value. It takes a lot of upkeep and things involved there. I have found some really great deals that way. That I think that would be one of the things I would highly recommend. If you're in an area and stuck, dealing, and you want to add a separate tool to your tool belt, you do. That's a great place. You do have to be sensitive to the family. Totally agree to that. Don't be sensitive. You don't want to be an asshole on the phone with them. I don't know if I can say that, but oh well. What you don't want to do is, let me come out and take a look at it immediately. No, you want to say, first of all, they tell you, somebody's passed. Be very sensitive. Say, I'm so sorry for your loss. I apologize. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. I mean, I'm still interested in potentially buying the property, or if your dad or husband or somebody had other property looking to move, I would love to take a look at it, maybe help you out if you're dealing with that. That's a really cool thing. Now, one of the things that often happens sometimes, you have to expect these deals may take a little while. They may need a month to get everything settled. They may need 6 months, especially if there's multiple children and there's not a will involved a lot of times. And it's intestate. Then you've got some issues. You've got to work through getting everybody to sign off on that. And that's a process. The more cooks in the kitchen, the less chiefs to get the work done. So that would be one thing that I would do. I wouldn't be sending postcards. I would be sending out personal letters. Hey, would love to talk to you about buying your property or properties if you came across multiple assets that they own, and go from there. Now, occasionally you'll get people that are upset. How do you know? Why do you know? We're not wanting to sell. Well, that's great. You have to understand. You have to have a bit of a thick skin when it comes to doing that and marketing for that. But there's people passing every day. There's people passing all the time. And so that would probably be the only direct mail that I would do. Besides mailing out to the code enforcement, if I could track down the homeowners. One of the most interesting deals that I did early on in my real estate investing career, I was living in Round Rock, Texas, and this is after I'd gotten rid of the bad assets and was living back in Round Rock, and there was this vacant property literally right around the corner from my house. And you've probably experienced it. You're driving by, you see an ugly house or a house that needs some work. You're like, wow, who owns it? Especially real estate investors out there, we really want to buy that house, want to target. I mean, this is one of the questions I get from people all the time. I want to buy the empty houses down the street. I want to buy the none of that. That's not always going to work. Well, I did a little research on this house, nice looking house, corner lot, 2-story house, and I tracked down, found the borrower's name, and I started doing searches. I jumped on White Pages. Jumped on Spokio, and found out that the borrower lived in a different city, in a small South Texas town. I was able to find who they worked for as well. Well, I couldn't find a phone number to the address, but I could find the next door neighbor to him in a small town. They had a phone number. So what did I do? I did 2 things. One, I sent 2 letters. I sent a letter to the borrower in a small town. I also sent a letter to the next door neighbor, said, hey, I'm trying to track down such and such. I'm told that they live next to you. Could you please pass on my information? I'd like to talk to them about buying their house in Round Rock, Texas. And then I found a working number for it. And then I called the neighbor and I said, hey, I'm Scott Carson. Sorry to bother you at night. Do you live at such and such address? And do you know such and such who lives next door? And the guy is like, well, yes, I do. I actually work with a guy. Which I was like, oh, really? That's awesome. So, well, I don't want to bother you, but I really like to talk to him about buying his house that he has in Round Rock, Texas. He's like, well, I work with him tonight in a shift. What I'll do is I'll pass on your phone number and then or email address, and I'll have, I'll let you know tomorrow whether he says whatnot, or I'll have him give you a phone call. Sure enough, next night I get a phone call, and it's the borrower on the phone, and we're talking back and forth. And what's funny is this poor guy had gotten divorced, all right? And in the divorce decree, he had to pay the mortgage, but it was up to his wife to sell the property. His wife had moved out of the house. Supposedly his wife had moved in with somebody else. And so he had this nice house in Round Rock, Texas that was kind of falling apart. It needed some work. Nobody had lived there for over 2 years. And, he was trying to get his wife to sign off on selling the property, and she wouldn't get around to it. So finally, since he was paying the mortgage on it, we were able to negotiate, because she was all worried that he was going to get something in the process. So I had to negotiate with a very combative husband and wife spouse. Now, one thing you might want to look at too is talk to divorce attorneys, because divorce attorneys will often run into this as well as great leads for people that have houses that need to sell things. Okay, another source for you to find if you're looking for different deals if the note business ended overnight. All right, divorce attorneys, great place to find properties that are motivated to move, and it can get a little bit creative sometimes, especially, I hate to say it, but we've dealt with our fair share of divorces, not only on the note side, but also previously in the business doing that stuff. But anyway, so I didn't negotiate. I was able to negotiate a subject to. And what's funny is the borrower, he's like, listen, he goes, I'll be at the house this weekend. I'm coming up. Why don't you meet me there and we'll talk? That was great. Well, in the same week, he called his wife, and the ex-wife had called me, and we talked on the phone. She's like, well, don't really know. I think it's worth it. Well, it's not worth what you think, because it needs work. It's maybe barely what you owe, worth barely what's owed on it. It needs work. It needs about 15, 20 grand worth of work to get it up in sellable condition. Plus, you've got a couple of weedlings that are going on the property. And there's notices from the city. And she's like, oh, okay, all right, you're right. Well, it's a funny situation. Well, whatever you can work out with my ex, I'll sign off on. I'm like, ooh, great. Good stuff. Woo, woo. So, met the borrower at the house. We walked through it. It needs some work. They left some stuff on it. It was dirty inside, but it wasn't trashed. You had, if I remember correctly, the shower stall had some towels that were falling off. Some older appliances. It definitely needed lawn mowing. And she's talking to the guy, and I come up. I have my checklist of kind of the things, closing costs and value, if it was at it, and when I talked, deducted things off. It was a really nice checklist that I could show them. Well, here's what it would cost basically to fix this up and get this a place to sell it. You're upside down on the property. And I know you don't have the 17 grand to come to this. Why don't you let me do this? Why don't you let me take over the property subject to? I'll do some work on it. But I want to either A, take over, start making the mortgage payments, or you can owner finance it to me for exactly what you owe. And we'll just do a wraparound mortgage. And I took a little bit of explaining to the guy, but about an hour and a half later, I walked out of the property. Get this, you're going to love this. With the key. I took over the property subject to, and he actually paid me $100. Why did he pay me $100? Because the yard needed mowing. I said, well, hey, if I got a kid down the street that can come in and mow this really fast if you want to avoid a weed lien this week, how about we do this? So he did. He really pulled out a $100 bill and gave it to me. So it was one of the funniest things. Walking into a house I never seen before. When I walked out, I had the key. I had basically an agreement to take over the payments, and I had a $100 bill, which I paid the neighborhood kid $20 to go mow the lawn, and I pocketed the $80. That's great. Door knocking. I know some people like to door knock on things. I don't like door knocking. I don't think it's a valuable use of my time. Now, if you have a code enforcement list or you see other things like that, then that's an effective aspect. Just driving around door knocking, I think, is just, you have to be careful in today's world. Too many weirdos out there. Too many times things can happen, and things can go wrong for you. All right. So those are a couple of things. Let's do a quick recap. So I would target basic properties that I can take over subject to. I would target property, and that's either got equity or a very low interest rate payment. All right. I'd be very hesitant to go anything above value unless really low interest rate that I could do a wraparound mortgage, still make money on. Okay. If you're very, very careful about that. There's people getting all upset about taking on subject to, not making any money, and not good at all. All right. I would look at path of progress, see where the values are going, and put options on those assets. Those that land or other properties outside of town, just talking to people. Like I said, it's cost you about $100 an asset, but you really have nothing to lose in that aspect of it. I would check out the code enforcement office for properties that have bad code enforcement issues. I check out the weed liens, where the lawn's not being mowed. There's issues with that. I would do like I see Teresa mentions here. Yes, I would go buy those properties, and then I would knock to the next door neighbors. Totally agree. Door knock on the next door neighbors, and see if I can track down the borrower's information, or if they knew the name specifically, or any other phone numbers. Because a lot of times, if a house is vacant, the next door neighbors may know the owners still. They may have a phone number. They may have been asked to wash the property. See anything? Hey, give me a phone call. Just because people are still friends. Still people pass brownies, especially in a good neighborhood. Often there'll be kids or things, and people will know each other in the neighborhood. So don't be afraid to talk. What's funny though, you be very careful. I have been shot at a couple times, door knocking on next door neighbors' houses. One time it happened in Gary, Indiana. Out knocking, looking at a vacant property, came across from an asset manager's list of property. I saw a neighbor like 4 houses down the back side of the block, mowing the lawn. So I walked down, talked to him. He was upset that I was in the neighborhood. Went into his garage, pulled out 44 Magnum, and fired off a couple rounds over my head. Good times. Good times. I've had a rental car shot at before, driving through a neighborhood. Yeah. So I avoid rough areas if I can. So avoid your crime-ridden areas too, because it's often not a usually good spot as well. So those are some of the creative things. Like I said, I would not waste my time sending out yellow letters just to mass neighborhoods. I would not send out postcards to the foreclosure list. That's the lowest hanging fruit that everybody's going to be mailing out to. I get yellow letters in the mail from people all the time. I make a phone call or two, nobody responds back. It's unfortunate. Most investors don't take their business seriously. So that's what I would do. If the note business wasn't around, that's what I would do. Now, I would target, here you go. I would target, like I said before, I would target smaller banks that are hitting the foreclosure lists that may not have realtors up in the REOs. I would also target smaller banks in different parts of the country to say, hey, what do you have on your books in other areas? As I have relationships in this neck of the woods that I may be able to help. One of the things that I would do as well is I would try to negotiate, especially in some of these real estate funds that are buying the larger portfolios notes. They're going to have stuff that's on their books that they can't get off their books, because as they're selling stuff off, they're selling off the nicer, the top tier, the middle tier of assets. They're often left with a big chunk of bottom tier assets that are bottom tier for a variety of reasons. It's not always that they're trashed out assets, which happens. They're just lower valued stuff that they have taken on. It's just not worth their time. Oftentimes, you can negotiate with these hedge funds, not banks. Banks are going to do this. A real estate hedge fund, especially as you get to the last quarter of the year, the first quarter, or the last quarter of their fiscal year, we've been able to use a non-exclusive option agreement. This kind of goes back to an option to begin with. An option agreement with the bank to take down the whole list, or not the bank, sorry, the hedge fund, for the whole list for whatever they're looking to sell it as. Now, that doesn't mean you're closing the whole thing. What I like to use with a non-exclusive option agreement, it's a $10 option agreement that basically says, hey, give me your price on these, give me 30 days, and let me be the only person that can go out and try to market these deals for sale for you. Anything I make above your price, I get to keep. And that's worked out well in the past. I worked with one hedge fund who sent me 75 assets on a tape that I'd seen them shop around. It wasn't all ugly assets. There were some nicer assets that just smaller valued in different parts of the country. And so I just used marketing skills. I used my marketing skills to go find investors in an area that are looking for that properties, whether it's jumping on Craigslist or meetup.com or Google. There's so many different ways now that you connect with people across the country from where we're at. You don't have to be in that neck of the woods. Okay. Great place to use it. If you don't sell it, great. Hey, you walk away from it, no money out. If they find somebody and they close on it, I just ask them to provide a copy of that contract, because I would have first right of refusal. First right to be able to take that property down is also in the option agreement. So if you've been to any of our mastermind meetings or heard us talk about that, the coaching calls, stuff like that, I've shared that with our WC and crew membership, the option agreement for people out there. Helena Jackson comments this morning. She says, I contact eviction leads with idea of buying either their house or seeing if they would be interested in buying notes. Okay, not bad, Helena. I would probably just focus on one aspect of that, see if they're interested in selling that property off because they're tired landlords. I don't necessarily think I would approach them to see if they would buy notes from you, because they're landlords. They understand the rental game. They may not understand the note game aspect of things. So yeah, we do see a lot of especially eviction liens when the borrower is out of state. They're often tired of dealing with it. They're especially having to do it themselves if they don't have a property manager in place. Because let's face it, good property managers are hard to find. Very hard to find out there. All right. But that's great. So, hey, contacting eviction leads, out-of-state borrowers is another lead list that you can pull. We've got a buddy, Steve Richter, who provides a lot of data for people, investors in different counties, and expired listing leads is one thing a lot of people are using. That was a good list that we would work on to see about getting somebody to let us take over property subject to or owner financing, because they were either trying to sell a property and it didn't sell, so they maybe fired the agent. You need to be careful, because a lot of times with expired listings, they're getting bombarded by new realtors trying to get the listing. And we would do something a little bit different. Instead of say, hey, we want to list your house, we'd like to talk about potentially buying your house on terms. And that's like my good buddy, Chris McClatchy, loves working with expired listings or people that are having a hard time selling their house. Yeah, I'll give you full value, your full listing price, but I want you to give it to me at 0% interest. And over time, that way your principal is reduced very rapidly by paying down the payment, where you end up paying a whole lot less than you would if you finance the property. So great use. I've used that 0% interest rate when we do some loan mods with some more borrowers. Hey, listen, if you start paying on time, I'll reduce your interest rate to 0%. So every bit of principal goes towards the balance of the loan that you paid off faster. I mean, I bought the note at a discount. I've got a lot of room, a lot of flexibility. If I paid 20 grand for the note, and I'm gonna recoup 100 grand over 5 years. Hey, that's a great return on investment for me. That's a great return. I don't mind giving somebody a 0% interest if they're going to work with me and start paying on time. So, God forbid anything happens. God forbid anything happen legislation-wise to eliminate the opportunity of us buying distressed debts. I've been doing it for over a decade now. Closed on thousands and thousands of note deals, performing, non-performing, residential, commercial. Let's talk a little about the commercial side of things, because I think a lot of people out there like the idea of commercial, but they often don't know how to get into it. Now, commercial note investing is probably where I would spend most of my time, because what happens when you have legislation take place? It's usually to protect the consumer. It's usually to protect the owner occupants, right? I doubt it that they would pass something that would stop you from buying commercial loans, commercial notes, because in that case, it's often buyer beware, not borrower beware. All right. So if they did away with that on the residential side, I would just jump in and focus 100% of my time on the commercial note space. Now, the commercial notes, you have to realize it take a little bit more time for the most part. But there is still a huge opportunity today in a specific area of distressed notes that would still be good, I believe, even if that stuff happened. And what am I talking about? Now, I'm not talking about your big $5 million Class A apartment complexes. If you're interested in buying apartment complexes, stay away from the Class A's. No offense, they're overpriced, and there's enough people chasing it. I would be looking at your Class B, Class C, maybe even your Class D, that would have some ability for you to increase the property value, move from there. But besides apartments, let's just talk nitty-gritty here today. If I was to be focused on things, I would be just solely focused on the sub-$1 million properties or the sub-$1 million notes that a lot of the banks have on their books, especially commercial assets, because they have a lot of this stuff. But the banks like stuff with 2 commas in it. That's not saying you can't find a lot of great assets. There's a lot of great commercial properties we see across the country that we can pick up the debt at a pretty good discount that's still got quite a bit of value to there. It's a great property. It's a great asset. It could be a mixed-use building. It could be a strip mall. It could be a small apartment complex. It could be a variety of different things. It could be a big box store, a smaller box store. There's a lot of opportunity in that commercial market space. You just got to know what the heck you're doing. You have to know exactly what you're doing. You can't. It's not like residential. I'm going to come in and pull comps on it. It's a whole different animal when it comes to the commercial note space. So that's the thing you have to realize. You have to pull comps. You've got to pull your own numbers. You got to try to check cash flow. If it's a vacant property, the value is dramatically reduced than if it's an occupied property, because commercial is all based on cap rate and net operating income. If there is, tenants in place, you have to try to find the leases, find out what those are running at, what kind of cash flow is coming in. Is it occupied? Is there a potential for you to increase the occupancy rate? There's a lot of moving parts of this. Now, I've got some friends that have moved into the self-storage space. I think it's a great space. You just have to be very careful when you're looking at a self-storage property that's not 100% occupied. You got to check really a 5-mile radius or 10-mile radius in some cases to see what the average occupancy of your other self-storage facilities are. If they're all at 65%, guess what? You're only going to stay at 65%. Now, you don't want to be the person that ends up dropping rent rates and ends up killing the market that way for profitability. You want to look at where your rents are compared to the market. Do I have the opportunity to increase my rates? Are we already oversaturated? That's why we're not going to see an increase above 65, 70%. Those are things that you have to keep in mind when you're looking at it, because the banks will often try to sell you on, if you get 100% occupied, you got a lot of upside to it. No, sorry, Mr. Banker. Your commercial note isn't as attractive as you think it is. Here's why. Okay. Sabrina, good to see you. Good morning there, Sabrina. She says, yes, commercial notes. This is my goal. I think you need to walk before you dive into commercial. You got to learn to walk and crawl and bust your knee up on some residential stuff first. That's my opinion to everybody out there. While you have the opportunity right now, learn the business, learn the systems. Commercial notes are a whole different ball game in this space. Great big checks, but you still want to have your bread and butter really coming in from the non-performing, residential. Or if you like performing notes, great. Focus on the commercial. The performing note side of residential, or in this, if the note world dried up aspect of things, I doubt it would affect the commercial note space. And I believe you'd still be able to see a lot of great things available out there. Commercial lending, being able to take over things subject to. I would also immediately jump on Scotsman Guide. That's one of my favorite websites for commercial notes. I would see who's originating, who's a portfolio lender, who's holding on to assets in a portfolio, especially the market took a dip south. Wink, wink. There's a money nugget for you there, because we're going to see that. We're already seeing that in parts of the country. Your smaller balance commercial loans are clogging up a lot of the bank's books, and they need to move it off their debt, off their decks. But you're seeing opportunity coming. You see a lot of the empty big box stores being turned into workspaces or executive suite stuff. You see some hotels being converted to apartments. You see some apartments being condo converted and being sold with owner financing if they're individually metered. There's a variety of different ways. You can see some odd-shaped properties turning into self-storage, because self-storage has a flexibility, very cheap to build out units as well on that aspect too. One thing that was very common, I'm actually glad that I see Teresa Crowley commented here on the Facebook live stream. I had an offer for a car wash. It was hard finding the numbers and doing my due diligence. I walked away as a new investor. I don't have the experience yet. Yeah, car washes can either be profitable or they can be a big drain. I would highly recommend, if you're getting ready to buy an asset and you don't have any experience on it, reach out and talk to other people that have the same type of asset. Those are great individuals that may be looking to add another car wash or another thing to their portfolio. and they'd be willing to pay you as a bird dog fee. But I would make one stipulation that they teach you. Teach me how to car washy. Teach me how to car washy instead of teach me how to Dougie. Yeah, I won't leave my day job. But anyway, because that's a great way. You want to learn, but you got to realize making something is better than not making anything at all. So reaching out to other car wash companies, saying, hey, are you looking for another location? I may have a lead on something. You know, we see a lot with, especially 10 years ago, we saw a lot with gas stations. We saw a lot with hotels, motels. Hotel, motels, you got to make the same thing. You got to check your rack rates. You got to check a lot of it. Is it a national chain? Is it flagged? You know, what's the situation? Does it have a lot of deferred maintenance? What's the issue? It's the same things you're going to be checking out if you, you know, a lot of things they'll just be doing on the multifamily side. That's why people like apartments, because you got to put your management on site and take it out. Another thing that I'd probably look at too is if I were to find a commercial asset that was distressed, but I couldn't buy the note yet, I would maybe look at doing a master lease on the property. Now, what's a master lease? Master lease, pretty much you get them to, basically, as I like to say, a master lease is where you come and negotiate a flat rate and it's like a wraparound. You're able, hey, you're pay you $4,000 a month regardless, and you're going to make the income above that $4,000. If you're able to rejuvenate the property, get it up to $6,000 or $8,000, you're making that difference. But it's basically you're leasing the whole property, the whole hotel, you know, the apartment complex out to the underlying borrower. They walk away. All right. So master leases, not many people do them, but they're still a great way to make some money on some commercial stuff. Teresa says, I love your car wash dance. Yes. Teach me how to washy. Teach me how to washy. I would, you know, one of the beautiful things is since we've been in this business for a while, is we often know a lot of experts in specific fields and specific niches that we've dealt with over the years. And so I know people that enjoyed car washes. I know people that hate car washes, Teresa. So thanks for that comment there as well. And, you know, everybody out there, it's also going to depend on what market you're in and what markets these assets are in. Some could be good, some could be bad. That's what the whole thing, when you're looking at assets, you're looking at markets, you got to make sure that, hey, your choice of marketing is going to work in your neck of the woods. All right. I live in Austin, Texas. We're really overpriced for the most part. That's not saying that yellow letters don't work. That's not saying that postcards don't work some of the time. It's just that they're so oversaturated. There's not that much inventory here that's available. You have a very strong real estate market here. We're seeing less than 3 months of inventory on the MLS. We are seeing a few distressed assets, but it's not much. Those are overcrowded. So what do? I stopped buying here in my backyard and started going outside of my backyard. I first went to Dallas, then I went to Houston or San Antonio. Then I moved beyond that into Florida, North Carolina. And what did I do? I went and spent some time there. Learned the market, talked to people, spent some time there developing relationships. I talked with an individual yesterday afternoon out of Dallas. He's like, oh, I want to get in the note business, and I want to do this and this in Dallas. I'm like, well, if you're just going to look for non-performing notes in Texas, you may want to save your money and go do something else. And he's like, what? I was like, no offense. You have to look at doing things outside of Texas really to find deals in different markets. And I said, I was like, if you're an engineer and you're suffering from overanalysis paralysis, no offense to any engineers listening out there, you have to realize that the distressed notes, there's a whole lot of different strategies that can go into. There's a whole lot of different exit strategies. By just having it on a spreadsheet isn't going to help things. You have to understand it and do some common sense underwriting. And a lot of people struggle with that. So that's why I told the guys, like, listen, you probably need to focus on 1 or 2 states to get things started, get educated, learn how to do what you're doing effectively, and go from there. So if you're listening out there for the first time on the podcast, you're listening across one of our 16 FM or AM radio stations across the country, do yourself a favor, go to weclosenotes.com, check out our videos. You're always more than welcome to text the word note, N-O-T-S, notes, it's plural, notes, to the phone number 72000, 72000. That'll get you opt into our system and send you over some over 80 hours of video and some of our coaching calls, and also nice informational spreadsheet. So text the word notes to 72000 to take advantage of that. So, but check out We Close Notes. Got a lot of information, a lot of education on that aspect of things. One of the biggest things I hear from people, it frustrates me, There's people always say there's not enough deals out there. And then there's not enough deals. Not when there's not enough, but when I hear people talking about not enough deals, it usually comes down to one thing and one thing only. It comes down to people won't market for deals. They won't take the time to market in the 21st century. And as I always like to make the joke, Scotty is here to help beam you up. Marketing is what separates those that stay down here from those that really excel. If you learn how to market and market in today's world smartly, effectively, and you can often hit a much larger audience for a lot cheaper than what you would for those that are buying postcards, dropping yellow letters, door knocking. Jeffrey Wolf, how can I get the sweet $sign shirt? The sweet $sign shirt, he's laughs at me at the video for those that are listening. You'll be getting one out in the WCN membership there for you, Jeffrey Wolf. For those that are interested, we have a monthly membership with online coaching calls and swag that goes out, and then also discounts across the board. If you want to find more information, just go to WCNmembership.com, WCNmembership.com. It's $97 a month. If I can't save you or make you $97 a month in your real estate business, I'm doing something wrong. So, but anyway, going back to it, marketing is really what separates. Every time I go to, whether it was in Tampa last week at the Tampa Note Meetup group, or going to San Diego for the San Diego Note Meetup group last week, or maybe it's back to Orlando today for our lunch and learn tomorrow. I know that's one of the big questions. Where do you find deals? Where are you finding deals? And these are the things that I preach on all the time. Build you a database, a list of asset managers, especially targeting banks for notes, and just reach out to them. Drop an email out once a month, once every 2 weeks maybe. Jump on LinkedIn and start contacting asset managers there. Jump on different mortgage licensing websites in your state. A lot of times your state will publish a list of everybody that's licensed to do business in that state that you can download. A lot of times they'll give you the contact information. Those are some of the great things you can do. I just found that out. I have a big shout out to Jim Myers. Jim Myers mentioned that you could go down to the local county office. They won't let you do it online, but then search for homeowners by name or self-directed IRA owners by name at the county clerk is a great way to find potentially distressed assets or people that are looking to fund your deals, because that's the other side of the equation. Finding deals. Well, how am I going to fund it? And it comes down to marketing for both of those things. Those are two of the most integral legs in your three-legged stool is marketing. Marketing for money, marketing for deals, and then taking action and making offers. Those are a couple of things that I highly recommend. If you're listening to this the first time, you're a regular listener, I'm going to ask you a question. How many deals have you made offers on? How many offers have you made in the last 30, 60, 90 days? Now, if you're brand new, hey, that's great. If you're still learning, hey, that's great. Nothing wrong with that. Get your feet wet. Get knowledgeable. But you're going to learn more from making your first offers than you will any time else. Anything else. Any workshop, any podcast, any video. You're going to learn more about yourself and the business by making offers and taking action. And that's why when people ask me, Scott, what would you do if the note market dried up? I don't really sweat. I would have to make a pivot. I have to make a change. To tweak some things. That's okay. Because one thing that we all know is going to happen. Change is going to happen. We're going to get older, and change is going to happen. Things are either going to get easier or they're going to get harder. I doubt they're going to get easier. But the aspect of it is, you know how to market, you should not sweat if any type of market changes. Because if you know how to market in your market in your market, that's an M&M. Market in your market, and or the markets you're looking and interested in, and know what's going on, you won't struggle. You'll still find deals. It may not be getting a list of 1,000 assets directly from a bank or 400 assets directly from a bank on a regular basis like we see in the note business, but it's still going to be opportunities. And he or she who is able to rotate or pivot the fastest often struggles the least, because you'll have the opportunities and you'll be ready to rock and roll. So how do you figure out those opportunities? How do you find those opportunities? Hey, network. Go to your local real estate investment club. If you don't have a real estate investment club, go to meetup.com, type in real estate, and look for meetup groups within 20 miles of your location. You can go to reiclub.com and check out there for some larger groups on there. Go to reiclub.com, look on the left-hand side, investor resources, see real estate investment clubs. They'll list them by state across the country. There's so many ways to get networked into your market or network into an outside market if you're living in California or another area that you need to be investing in other areas, hey, that's the first thing I would go to those meetup groups, go to those REI clubs you can, schedule a time, fly out and enjoy the city, drive around the city at the same time that a meetup group meets. And you'll often have an opportunity to build a pretty good team all at one shot with going to an investment club and finding either realtors there, contractors, property preservations, title companies, hard money lenders, all sorts of vendors at your local meetup group. And that's a great way to build a team in other areas that are outside of your backyard. Okay. Good stuff, Sabrina. Welcome aboard the WC membership. I appreciate that. Well, she just signed up. Awesome stuff. Anyway, guys and gals, that is going to probably wrap it up for this episode unless there's any other online questions of things out there. So let's do a quick recap before we wrap it up. What would I focus on if the note business ended overnight? If something happened, I was not able to do what I do now, I would look at the path of progress for options on properties 1 mile to 5 miles out of town to take advantage of the increased value over 5 years of an option agreement. I would look at subject twos where there's equity or very low interest rate to either A, turn into rentals, or A, turn into an owner finance where I can arbitrage that deal. Third thing, I would look at, you talk to your zoning offices, your code enforcement offices primarily, and seeing properties that are having zone or code violations and reach out to those homeowners. All right. Fourth thing, I would reach out to our deceased friends or obituaries to see if they own any property and drop them a letter. Talk about, hey, I want to buy your property, and then negotiate with either the people that are in charge of the estate or the family members and try to offer up a cash offer and you can close on a property relatively quickly. That may often lead to not just one deal, but multiple deals. And then I would also look at jumping more in the commercial note space and looking at those commercial deals, primarily the sub-$1 million balance assets. And then I would also target your smaller hedge funds for any stuff they may have in their books at the very end, either REO side or stuff that they are looking to sell off that they don't have the patience or the time to do. So hopefully that was a valuable episode for you guys and gals out there. Thank you for everybody's listening. Give me a shout out. Make sure to put the hashtag #NoteClosersShow if you're going to share this on Twitter or Facebook or any of your social media platforms out there. As always, check us out online. Follow us on if you like what you're listening to. You can always listen to more of our past episodes by checking out any of the podcasting platforms out there, iTunes, Stitcher, or anything else out there. We're just about everywhere, everybody. So other than that, go out, make something happen, and we'll see you all at the top, everybody.